Look at your hands. Turn them over. They are instruments of incredible complexity, capable of playing a symphony, performing microsurgery, or shaping the digital world with a few keystrokes. For over 100,000 years, your direct ancestors had hands just like these. They possessed the same brains, the same bodies, the same biological hardware you have right now. Yet for an impossibly long stretch of time, they did almost nothing with them. They created the same simple stone tools, generation after generation, in a state of near-perfect technological stasis. Then, in a geological heartbeat, everything changed. Art, music, complex regional cultures, and abstract thought erupted across the globe, seemingly all at once. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside the human mind, unleashing a torrent of creativity that had been dormant for millennia. The question is, what flipped it? This isn't just an archaeological curiosity. This is the mystery of how we became us. And if you're using this to fall asleep, perfect. That's exactly what it's for. So maybe hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is. I genuinely love checking those. It's wild seeing London at sunrise, New York at lunch, Los Angeles at midnight, all watching at the same time. Tonight, we journey back to a time before time was recorded. We are going to investigate the single greatest discontinuity in the human story. First, we will explore the long, strange silence of our species, a period of more than 100,000 years of eerie stagnation. Then, we will witness the sudden, staggering explosion of light and creativity that followed. We will examine the conventional explanations that scientists have offered, and I will show you precisely why they fall short. Finally, we will confront a more profound and unsettling possibility, an explanation for this anomaly that changes everything you think you know about the human mind. Picture the world 200,000 years ago. Anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, are walking the plains of Africa. They look like us. Their brains are the same size as ours. If you gave one a shave, a haircut, and a suit, they would be indistinguishable from anyone on a crowded street today. Yet, their world was profoundly different, not just in its wildness, but in its profound lack of change. For a stretch of time so vast it is difficult to comprehend, our species was locked in a pattern. The toolkit they used, known as the Mysterian industry, was effective but brutally simple. A hand axe, a scraper, a pointed stone. These were the pinnacle of technology. And they remained the pinnacle of technology for 100,000 years. Think about that. The entire written history of human civilization, from the first Sumerian clay tablets to the device you're listening on now, is only about 5,000 years long. We are talking about a period 20 times longer than all of recorded history, where almost nothing new was invented. Generation after generation lived and died using the exact same tools as their great-great-grandparents, 1,000 times removed. They hunted, they survived, they spread out of Africa and across the globe. But they did not seem to create. They did not seem to innovate. There is no undisputed art from this period, no evidence of music, no complex burials suggesting a belief in an afterlife, no regional styles or cultural identities expressed through their artifacts. A stone tool from France looked almost identical to one from the Levant. It's a terrifying stasis. Imagine your smartphone never receiving a software update for 100,000 years. It's an almost perfect, unbroken flatline of cultural and technological development. These were not primitive, ape-like creatures. These were us. And for a period longer than we can truly imagine, we were static. This is the great anomaly. the long silence that precedes the mystery. What were they waiting for? Then, around 50,000 years ago, something unprecedented happened. The flat line on the graph of human progress doesn't just tick upwards, it goes vertical. Archaeologists call it the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, and it is the single most important event in our prehistory. It's as if a dam broke, and a flood of pure novelty and imagination reshaped the human experience forever. Suddenly, the archaeological record is on fire. In caves across Europe, like Chauvet and Lascaux, the walls explode with breathtaking art. These are not crude stick figures. These are masterful depictions of bison, horses, and mammoths, drawn with a confidence and understanding of perspective that would not be seen again until the Renaissance. They used shading, colour, and the natural contours of the rock to create a sense of three-dimensional life and movement. This wasn't just decoration. This was meaning. This was story. The toolkit transforms overnight. The simple, clunky hand axes are replaced by a stunning variety of specialised blades, burins and points, each crafted for a specific purpose. For the first time, we see tools made from bone, ivory, and antler, carved with incredible precision. We find the first bone needles, a seemingly small invention that unlocked a world of tailored clothing, allowing humans to survive in the harshest Ice Age climates. We find spear throwers, or atlatls, that revolutionized hunting, allowing small bands to take down the largest and most dangerous megafauna. But it's the symbolic objects that are truly mind-blowing. In Germany, archaeologists unearthed the Löwenmensch, the Lion Man figurine. Carved from mammoth ivory around 40,000 years ago, it depicts a human body with the head of a lion. This is not something that exists in the real world. This is an idea. It's the physical manifestation of a myth, a story, a belief system. It's proof that these people lived in a world not just of things, but of concepts. We find the first musical instruments, elegant flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory, capable of playing complex melodies. We find intricate personal ornaments, beads, pendants, and bracelets. These are the first signs of personal identity, of social status, of group affiliation. Burials become elaborate, with bodies laid to rest alongside tools, ornaments, and offerings, suggesting a new and powerful belief in a world beyond this one. This wasn't a gradual evolution. This was a revolution of the mind. So, the question becomes, why? What could possibly explain such a sudden and profound transformation in a species that had been behaviourally static for so long? For decades, the simplest explanation was biological. The theory went that a random genetic mutation occurred in a small population of humans, perhaps in Africa, around 50,000 years ago. This mutation rewired the brain, unlocking the capacity for symbolic thought or fully modern language. This new cognitively advanced human then spread out across the world, replacing all the older, less capable populations. It's a clean and simple narrative, except it's almost certainly wrong. First, the genetic evidence doesn't support a single dramatic genius mutation. Our DNA is far more complex than that. More importantly, the archaeological evidence contradicts it. We know that anatomically modern humans were living outside of Africa, in places like Australia, for at least 15,000 years before this revolution supposedly happened. They had the same hardware. Why didn't they start painting and carving? The idea of a biological upgrade also uncomfortably implies that pre-revolution humans were somehow less intelligent, less aware, less human. But all the evidence suggests they were clever, adaptable survivors. The hardware was already there. The next popular theory points to the environment. Perhaps a dramatic shift in climate during the last ice age forced humans to become more innovative to survive. The pressure of new environmental challenges could have sparked new technologies and social structures. This makes some sense. Hardship often breeds ingenuity. But here's the problem. The Earth's climate has always been unstable. Our species survived dozens of dramatic climate swings, some even more severe than the ones around 50,000 years ago. For the preceding 100,000 years, those climate shifts did not trigger a creative explosion. They triggered migration and adaptation, but not art and music. Why was this time different? The climate change hypothesis explains a need for new tools, perhaps. It does not explain the Lion Man. It does not explain the birth of mythology. A third explanation focuses on population density. As human populations grew, the theory goes, there were more minds to have new ideas and more people to pass those ideas on to. Information could be shared more effectively, allowing innovations to accumulate rather than being lost. This creates a kind of collective intelligence, a cultural ratcheting effect where progress can build upon itself. This is a powerful idea, and it likely played a role. But again, it feels incomplete. It doesn't fully account for the sheer suddenness and the specific nature of the change. Why did this cultural ratcheting suddenly switch on? And why did it produce not just better spear points, but a deep, overwhelming need to represent the world symbolically? The shift wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. It was a change in the very fabric of consciousness. Each of these theories holds a piece of the truth, but none of them, alone or together, can fully explain the anomaly. They don't explain the lightning-fast transition from 100,000 years of sameness to a world filled with art, music, and myth. It's like trying to explain the invention of the internet by looking only at the price of copper wire. You're missing the most important part of the story. So, where does that leave us? If it wasn't a change in our brains, our climate, or simply the number of people, what was it? The answer might be something both simpler and far more profound. What if the change wasn't in our hardware, but in our software? What if the revolution was the invention of a new kind of language? We know that earlier humans and Neanderthals could likely communicate, but their language may have been purely practical, a tool for coordinating hunts or warning of danger. It might have been a language of the here and now. The Great Leap, the true revolution, may have been the development of fully syntactic, recursive language, a language that allows you to talk about things that are not present. You can speak of yesterday, you can plan for tomorrow, you can tell a story about a lion, and crucially, you can tell a story about a lion that is also a man. Recursion is the ability to embed one idea inside another infinitely. I know that you think that she believes. This is the trick that allows for complex sentences, for abstract thought, for what-if scenarios. This linguistic software, once developed, wouldn't spread through genes. It would spread like a virus, from mind to mind, from group to group. It could ignite a global population in a matter of a few thousand years, a mere blink in evolutionary time. This software update would have been the most powerful tool ever invented. It allowed for the creation of shared fictions, myths, religions, tribal identities. These are the stories we tell ourselves that allow for unprecedented levels of cooperation. You cannot unite 10,000 strangers around a hunt, but you can unite them around a shared belief in a tribal ancestor, a creator god, or a sacred mountain. Language created a new, invisible world of shared meaning that existed purely in the collective imagination. The Lion Man is not just a carving, it is the fossilized evidence of a story. The cave paintings are not just pictures of animals, they are the backdrop for rituals, the visualization of a myth, a way of structuring the cosmos. The intricate burials are not just a way of disposing of the dead. They are the physical enactment of a belief in a spirit world, a journey after death. This is what was missing for all those millennia of silence. Our ancestors had the brains, the hands, and the vocal cords. But they lacked the operating system that could network their minds together. They were a world of disconnected computers, each powerful but limited. The invention of complex storytelling language was the creation of the first human internet, a biological network that allowed ideas to be shared, combined, and built upon at an explosive rate. The implications are staggering. This means that the dawn of human creativity, the very thing that defines us, was not a biological event, but a cultural one. It wasn't inevitable. It was invented. We didn't evolve into storytellers. We learned how to become them. And once we learned, we could never go back. This new software allowed us to plan for the future in complex ways, leading to new technologies and survival strategies. It allowed us to build larger and more complex social groups, held together by the glue of shared culture. But most importantly, it created a new inner landscape. For the first time, humans could get lost in thought, reflect on their own existence, and ask the great questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? What happens when we die? The prehistoric anomaly that archaeologists cannot explain may not be an anomaly at all. It may simply be the moment the evidence of our inner world finally starts to appear in the dirt. Before the revolution, human consciousness may have been like a dreamless sleep. After, it was a waking dream, filled with gods, monsters, heroes, and possibilities. So look at your hands one last time. They are the same hands that chipped away at the same kind of stone axe for 1,000 centuries. But they are guided by a mind that was reprogrammed, ignited by the power of narrative. The greatest tool we ever invented wasn't made of stone or bone. It was invisible. It was language. It was the story. And it's the one we are still telling ourselves today. The mystery isn't what happened to our bodies 40,000 years ago. The mystery is what happened to our minds. And that revolution is still happening right now, in the quiet space between these words and your understanding. But how does a revolution of the mind actually begin? A change in our genes, in our biological hardware, is a slow, grinding process. It is passed down vertically, from parent to child, and it can take tens of thousands of years to become widespread. But the revolution we are talking about moved with a speed that biology simply cannot account for. It was a flash fire. This is because we are not talking about hardware. We are talking about the most potent, contagious, and transformative force on the planet. An idea. Think of this new form of language not as a feature we evolved, but as a technology we discovered. Like the discovery of fire, once it existed, it was unstoppable. It did not need to wait for the slow march of generations. It could leap from one person to another in a single conversation. It could cross entire continents in the time it took for a small band of travelers to meet another. It was a mind virus, a beneficial infection that reconfigured the cognitive architecture of everyone it touched. Imagine two separate groups of early humans meeting at a riverbank. One group possesses only a simple, functional language for communicating immediate needs. The other has unlocked the secret of the narrative. They can speak of the future, of the past, of abstract spirits, of the adventures of a great ancestor. Which group do you think would have a more powerful social bond? Which group could better coordinate its actions, plan for a harsh winter, or create a shared identity that binds them together against their rivals? The new language was a weapon. It was a tool for survival more powerful than any stone axe. It allowed for the storage of information, not in a single brain, but across a collective consciousness. The wisdom of an elder could now be passed down not just as a simple instruction, but as a memorable story, a myth, a legend. This was the birth of culture, a second layer of inheritance that worked exponentially faster than genetic inheritance. Evolution had been working on our bodies for millions of years. Now, with this new software, the evolution of our minds had been unleashed, and it would quickly outpace biology forever. But here is where the story gets even stranger, more complex. The image of a single, sudden revolution, a flash of light in the darkness, is compelling. But the ground beneath our feet is beginning to tell a more nuanced story. For a long time, we believed the silence was absolute until that 50,000-year mark. Now, we are finding faint whispers in the long quiet, cracks in the great wall of stasis. Go back with me to a cave on the coast of South Africa, Blombos Cave. Here, archaeologists have found something that should not exist. They have unearthed pieces of ochre, a kind of iron-rich clay, meticulously engraved with geometric patterns, a crosshatch design. These are not accidental scratches. They are deliberate, abstract markings. And they date to 75,000 years ago, a full 25,000 years before the creative explosion was supposed to have begun. Nearby, they found snail shells, each one carefully perforated in the exact same way, clearly designed to be strung together as beads. This is personal adornment. This is symbolic expression. This is identity. And it is tens of thousands of years too early. What does this mean? It means the capacity for symbolic thought. The hardware for this new consciousness was not switched on like a light. The potential was there, flickering in isolated pockets, long before the main event. These were not one-off discoveries. At other sites in Africa and the Levant, we find evidence of pigment processing and the use of shells that date back even further, to over 100,000 years ago. These are the faint, ghostly precursors to the revolution. They are like sparks that failed to catch fire, moments of creative brilliance that, for some reason, winked out of existence without spreading across the globe. This deepens the mystery profoundly. The question is no longer just, why the revolution? The question is now, why did it fail so many times before it succeeded? If our ancestors in South Africa were capable of abstract art 75,000 years ago, why did it take another 25 millennia for that impulse to conquer the world? This is where we must return to the idea of population density, but with a new understanding. An idea, no matter how brilliant, needs a network to survive. A single person, or even a small, isolated band, can have a world-changing insight. But if that band dies out, or if they never meet another group, the idea dies with them. The incredible creations at Blombos Cave may have been the work of a single forgotten genius, a prehistoric Leonardo da Vinci, whose innovations were simply lost to the static of a sparsely populated world. For an idea to become a revolution, it needs a critical mass of interconnected minds. It needs a human internet. For tens of thousands of years, humanity may have been like a series of disconnected, low-bandwidth networks. Innovations would appear, shine brightly for a few generations in one small valley or along one stretch of coastline, and then vanish. The Great Revolution may have been the moment when, for the first time, these local networks finally linked up. As populations grew and migrated, the web of human connection became dense enough for an idea to not just survive, but to go viral on a planetary scale. So the creative explosion was not the invention of the light bulb. It was the moment the power grid was finally switched on, the The sparks had been there all along, but now there was a network to carry the current. Let's turn our gaze to another character in this story, one that stood beside us for hundreds of thousands of years. A different kind of human, watching from the shadows of Ice Age Europe, the Neanderthals. To understand our own uniqueness, we must first look into this distorted mirror. Neanderthals were not the brutish, hunched-over cavemen of popular cartooning. They were incredibly successful. They had brains that were, on average, even slightly larger than our own. They were powerfully built, expertly adapted to the cold, and they were masters of their domain for a period that dwarfs our own history. They survived in the harshest of environments for 300,000 years, and yet their archaeological record tells a familiar story, a story of profound, almost absolute stasis. Their toolkit, also called the Mousterian, remained virtually unchanged for its entire existence. It was effective, but it was static. Like early Homo sapiens, they show almost no evidence of art, music, or complex symbolism for the vast majority of their time on Earth. What was going on inside the mind of a Neanderthal? It's one of the greatest questions in human science. Were their large brains wired differently? Did they possess language? Most researchers believe they did, but perhaps it was of that older, purely functional kind. A language of the here and now. A language for survival, not for storytelling. A language without myth. But here is where it gets incredibly compelling. The very end of the Neanderthal story coincides perfectly with the beginning of our creative explosion in Europe. Around 40,000 years ago, as modern humans, Homo sapiens, swept into the continent armed with their new cognitive toolkit, we see the Neanderthals begin to do something strange. For the first time, in their final few millennia of existence, we find them making personal ornaments, pendants from eagle talons, perforated teeth, things that look suspiciously like the symbolic artifacts of the new arrivals. What does this tell us? Were they suddenly inventing symbolism on their own, at the exact same moment their competitors arrived? It's possible. Or were they seeing the incredible creations of the new humans and, for the first time, trying to imitate them? Were they trying to copy the software they saw running in the minds of their neighbors without truly understanding the underlying operating system? It's a tragic and fascinating possibility. Imagine a people, successful for millennia, suddenly confronted with an alien intelligence whose power was not in the strength of their arms, but in the power of their shared fictions. The interaction between our two species may have been the final catalyst. For Homo sapiens, arriving in a new land already occupied by another intelligent hominin would have created unprecedented pressure. The need to maintain social cohesion, to define your group as us against them, would have been paramount. This is exactly the kind of pressure that would supercharge the use of symbolic culture, of art, clothing, and ritual to define tribal identity. The revolution may have gone into overdrive precisely because we had to distinguish ourselves from our cousins. For the Neanderthals, the story is darker. They may have been cognitively outmaneuvered, unable to form the large, symbolically united groups that allowed Homo sapiens to cooperate with a flexibility and on a scale never before seen on Earth. They saw the signal, but they couldn't grasp the meaning. Within a few thousand years of our arrival in Europe, they were gone forever. Their silence is a haunting testament to the power of the revolution that was reshaping the human mind. They were the control group in the great experiment, and their extinction proves just how potent this new software truly was. This forces us to ask a much deeper and, frankly, more disturbing question. Was the revolution just about inventing new tools and telling better stories? Or did it represent a fundamental alteration in the nature of consciousness itself? What if I told you that for the first 100,000 years of our existence as a species, we were not self-aware in the way you are right now? What if the constant inner monologue, the voice in your head that is you, the narrator of your life story, was not a biological given, but a cultural invention? This is a radical idea. But think about it. The defining feature of all the revolutionary artifacts, the Lion Man, the cave paintings, the elaborate burials, is that they point to something else. They are symbols. They require a mind that can hold two concepts at once. This piece of ivory and the idea of a mythical lion spirit, this red pigment on a wall and the memory of the great bison hunt, this dead body and the belief in a journey to the spirit world. This requires a new kind of mental space, an inner, imagined world that is just as real as the outer, physical one. This is the birth of the metaphorical mind. Before this, consciousness may have been a far more direct and unreflective experience, a state of pure presence. You feel hunger, you find food, you see a predator, you run. There is no narrator worrying about what you will eat tomorrow, or ruminating on the meaning of the predator's existence. There is no I separate from the world, observing and judging it. There is only the seamless flow of experience. The new language, the storytelling language, shattered this unity. It created a narrator. It created the I. For the first time, you could place yourself as a character in a story. The story of your past, the story of your future, the story of your tribe. This act of self-reflection, of seeing yourself from the outside, is the foundation of modern consciousness. It would have been a terrifying and exhilarating awakening. Suddenly, the universe was not just a set of things, it was a set of meanings. A storm was no longer just a weather event, it was the anger of a sky god. A successful hunt was not just good fortune, it was a blessing from the spirit of the mammoth. The world became enchanted, filled with invisible forces, intentions, and stories. And at the center of it all was a new entity, the self. A self that could feel pride, shame, guilt, and existential dread. The art in the caves might not just be pictures of animals. They may be the records of the first journeys into this new inner landscape. The shamanic visions, the dreams, the myths. These people weren't just painting what they saw with their eyes. They were painting what they were now seeing for the first time with their minds. They were charting the geography of the human soul. So where could such a profound cognitive shift have come from? A simple increase in population or a change in climate feels woefully inadequate to explain the birth of the ego, the dawning of the metaphorical mind. What could be the key that unlocks the door to this inner world? Some researchers have proposed a fascinating and controversial possibility. The key may not have been a tool of stone, but a tool of biochemistry. What if our ancestors stumbled upon the psychoactive properties of plants and fungi in their environment? Picture a small group foraging for food. They experiment as all animals do. They consume a mushroom, a root, a cactus. And then the world dissolves. The boundaries between self and other, between the physical and the spiritual, melt away. They experience visions. They communicate with what they perceive as spirits. They are plunged into the very heart of the symbolic, mythical reality that would come to define the human revolution. This is not just idle speculation. The kind of art that appears in this period is powerfully suggestive of altered states of consciousness. All over the world, early rock art is filled not just with realistic depictions of animals, but with strange geometric patterns, dots, spirals, grids, and zigzags. These are known as entoptic phenomena, patterns that are generated by the structure of our own optic nerve and visual cortex, when in a trance state, whether induced by hallucinogens, rhythmic dancing, sensory deprivation, or meditation. You can see these patterns yourself. Just close your eyes and press gently on your eyelids. Those shimmering, geometric shapes you see are the building blocks of early prehistoric art. The artists, it seems, were drawing the internal wiring of their own brains. And then there are the therianthropes, the hybrid figures like the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, or the sorcerer of the Trois Frères cave, a figure with the body of a man, the antlers of a stag, and the eyes of an owl. These are the classic visions of shamanic journeys, the blending of human and animal spirits, the dissolution of the boundaries of the self. Could these psychoactive substances have been the catalyst? Could they have been the chemical key that blasted open the doors of perception and showed our ancestors the existence of a symbolic reality? This would explain the spiritual, mythical, and sudden nature of the revolution in a way that other theories cannot. It wasn't a gradual process of becoming better toolmakers. It was a sudden, profound, and terrifying plunge into a new dimension of consciousness. The first shamans would have been the astronauts of this inner space. They journeyed into these worlds and brought back the stories, the myths, and the art. They brought back a new model of reality, one that could be shared and elaborated upon through the new power of recursive language. This model of reality, where the world is saturated with meaning and invisible forces, was an incredible tool for survival. A belief in punishing spirits can enforce social rules far more effectively than a chief with a club. A shared creation myth can bind thousands of people into a cohesive tribe willing to fight and die for one another. Religion and mythology were not just fanciful stories. They were the ultimate social technology enabled by this new consciousness. But we must be careful not to romanticize this awakening. The birth of the modern mind was not without its shadows. The invention of the self, the ego, was also the invention of a new kind of suffering. For 100,000 years, our ancestors lived in the immediate present. The new consciousness trapped us in a prison of our own making. For the first time, we could experience anxiety about a future that did not yet exist. We could feel regret and guilt over a past that was already gone. We became aware of our own mortality, and with that awareness came the terror of death. The universe was no longer a simple home. It was a place of deep and troubling questions without easy answers. And the same shared fictions that allowed for unprecedented cooperation also allowed for unprecedented conflict. The very idea of us creates the idea of them. The stories that bound a tribe together also defined who was outside that tribe, who was the other, the enemy. The archaeological record after the revolution starts to show signs of something new and horrifying. Organized large-scale violence. We see mass graves. We see skeletons with projectile points embedded in them. We see fortified settlements. The creative explosion gave us art and music. It also gave us warfare. The shaman's journey gave us mythology and religion. It also gave us xenophobia and dogma. The birth of the self gave us introspection and identity. It also gave us ego, greed, and a profound sense of alienation from the natural world. It was a deal with the devil, a Faustian bargain. In exchange for the power to reshape the planet in our own image, we accepted a new and permanent state of psychological unease. This duality is the central paradox of the human experience, and its origin point is this revolution. Every cathedral and every concentration camp, every symphony and every battle hymn, every act of selfless love and every act of calculated genocide has its roots in this cognitive shift. we unlocked a power that we have never, even to this day, fully learned to control. So the flat line of the Middle Paleolithic was not a time of stupidity or ignorance. In some ways, it may have been a time of peace, a peace born of a simpler consciousness, a mind that was not yet at war with itself. The story of how we became us is not a simple ascent from primitive to advanced. It is a much more complex and tragic story of a creature that gained the world but perhaps lost a part of its soul. Think about the architecture of your own mind right now. You have that ancient, immediate consciousness, the part of you that feels the warmth of the sun or the pang of hunger. But layered on top of it is the revolutionary software. The constant narrator, the storyteller, the worrier, the planner. This is the 40,000-year-old ghost in your machine. It is the source of your greatest achievements and your deepest anxieties. We are still living in the chaotic, brilliant, and terrifying aftermath of that one great event. The shockwaves of that explosion are still shaping our world. The technologies we build, the societies we create, the questions we ask of the cosmos. All of this is a continuation of the project that began in an Ice Age cave with a piece of charcoal and a mind that had just woken up to itself. And perhaps the most crucial piece of this puzzle lies not in the past, but in the present, in the development of every single human child. Each person born today retraces this entire journey. A baby is born into that state of pure, unreflective presence. They do not have a sense of self separate from the world. They live in a seamless here and now. Then, through the acquisition of language, they undergo their own personal cognitive revolution. They learn the word I. They begin to tell stories. They construct a narrative of who they are. They learn to imagine the future and reflect on the past. They are, in essence, downloading the same operating system that their ancestors first booted up around a fire 40,000 years ago. This tells us that the revolution was not a one-time event locked in the distant past. It is a latent potential within our species, a potential that must be activated in every generation. The hardware is there, but the software must be installed. And the installation medium is culture. It is the stories, songs, and interactions with other minds that build the narrator in a child's head. What if, in those early sparks like Blombos Cave, the cultural transmission was too weak? What if the teachers were too few and the students too scattered for the installation to complete successfully across a population? The revolution may have been waiting for the moment when human culture became rich and stable enough to reliably pass this complex software from one generation to the next without error. The extension of the human lifespan may have been a critical factor. The grandmother hypothesis suggests that women living longer past their reproductive years created a new social role, keepers of knowledge. These experienced elders could care for children, freeing up younger adults, but more importantly, they became living libraries. They were the repositories of stories, social rules, and complex information that could now be reliably passed down. The presence of a few wise grandmothers in a group may have been more revolutionary than any new spear point. They were the servers for the new human network. This reframes the entire mystery. We have been searching for a single trigger, a magic bullet, a gene, a climate event, a new tool. But the answer may be far more holistic. It may have been a cascade, a perfect storm of converging factors, populations reaching a critical density, language crossing a threshold of complexity, the social stability provided by longer lifespans, and perhaps a chemical or ritual key that revealed the existence of a new inner reality. None of these things alone was enough, but together they created a feedback loop. More people led to more ideas. Better language allowed those ideas to be shared and refined. Shared myths allowed larger groups of people to cohere. Larger groups were more resilient, allowing more individuals to survive and pass on their cultural knowledge. It was a ratchet, a runaway process of cognitive and cultural evolution that once started could not be stopped. We are the direct descendants of the first people caught in this feedback loop. We are the inheritors of both its brilliant light and its terrifying darkness. We live inside a world constructed of shared fictions, nations, laws, money, corporations. None of these things exist in the physical world. They are stories we have collectively agreed to believe, and they are the most powerful forces on the planet. This power is a direct consequence of the cognitive tools our ancestors forged in the crucible of the last ice age. The mystery of the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, then, is the mystery of our own origin story. It is the moment we ceased to be just another clever animal and became something entirely new, a creature that lives as much in the world of imagination as in the world of reality, a symbolic species, a storytelling ape, and the search for answers continues. Every new fossil, every new artifact, every new genetic sequence adds another piece to this staggering puzzle. We are using the very tools of that revolution: abstract thought, symbolic representation, and collective learning to try and understand how they came to be. We are minds forged in that ancient fire, now turning back to gaze into the flames. Let us zoom in on that feedback loop, on that perfect storm of converging factors. We often imagine prehistory as a story of objects, of sharpened stones and carved bones. But the most profound changes are often invisible, leaving no direct trace in the fossil record. One of the most powerful catalysts in our cognitive revolution was not an object at all, but a space, a new kind of time. It was the invention of the night. For millions of years, our hominin ancestors were creatures of the day. The setting of the sun meant retreat, silence, and fear. Darkness was a wall, a sensory prison patrolled by predators with far better night vision. Life was divided into two stark realities: the light, a time for doing, and the dark, a time for hiding. But the mastery of fire shattered that reality forever. We know our ancestors controlled fire for hundreds of thousands of years before the great creative explosion. They used it for warmth, for protection, for cooking. But what we often overlook is the profound social and psychological change it wrought. With the creation of the hearth, a stable, controllable fire at the center of a camp, our ancestors carved out a sphere of light and safety from the primordial dark. For the first time, they owned the night. This created a new, empty block of time. After the day's hunt and gathering were done, after the food was cooked and eaten, there were hours of waking time with nothing to do. The community was gathered. They were safe. Their bellies were full. And they were staring into the mesmerizing, flickering heart of the fire. What happened in that space? This was the birth of the first human theatre, the first cinema. The firelight would have softened faces, casting long, dancing shadows. In this liminal state, halfway between the hard reality of the day and the dream world of sleep, the imagination could run free. This is where the simple communication of the hunt, "There is a bison by the river," could transform into something more. It could become a story, a reenactment, a legend. Think of the power of a skilled storyteller, their voice rising and falling, their face illuminated by the flames, painting pictures in the minds of their audience. This is where the practical information of survival could be woven into the fabric of myth. The great hunter becomes a hero. The dangerous predator becomes a monster. The quirks of the landscape become the actions of ancient spirits. The hearth became a cognitive incubator, a place where the new software of narrative language could be practiced, refined, and passed on. And it did something more. The act of cooking food over that fire was a form of external digestion. It unlocked far more calories and nutrients from the same amount of food, particularly from meat and starchy tubers. This caloric surplus had to go somewhere, and it went to the most energy-hungry organ in the known universe, the human brain. Your brain, right now, consumes about 20% of your body's total energy budget, despite being only 2% of your body weight. The new complex software of symbolic thought, of constant inner monologue, of imagining futures and pasts, is incredibly expensive to run. The hearth, by providing both the fuel for the brain and the social theatre to exercise it, created the very conditions necessary for the revolution to catch fire. But there is another invisible revolution we must consider, one that ran parallel to the changes in our minds. It was a revolution of material culture so profound it changed everything about our relationship with the world. Yet it is almost entirely missing from the archaeological record. I am talking about the invention of string. Look around you. Fiber technology is so fundamental to our world that we barely notice it. The clothes you are wearing, the chair you are sitting on, the wiring in your walls, the tires on your car, all rely on the ancient principle of twisting fibers together to create a stronger whole. For our Ice Age ancestors, the discovery of how to make string from plant fibers, sinew, or hair was an explosion of technological possibility on par with the discovery of the microchip. Why is it invisible? Because string, nets, baskets, and textiles are made of organic materials. They rot, they disappear. Stone and bones survive for millennia, and so our picture of the Paleolithic world is skewed, biased toward these durable materials. We call it the Stone Age, but for the people living in it, it was equally a world of wood, hide, and fiber. We are missing half the picture, but we see the consequences of this revolution everywhere. Suddenly, we find the first bone needles, evidence of tailored clothing sewn with thread. We find fish hooks and harpoons that would have been useless without a line attached. We see the appearance of tiny clay impressions of woven baskets and textiles, accidentally preserved when fired. And we see a dramatic shift in the kinds of animals people were eating. Alongside the bones of mammoths and bison, we start finding the bones of birds, rabbits, and fish in huge numbers. How are they catching these fast, small animals? You cannot do it reliably with a spear. You do it with nets, traps, and snares. This represents a monumental shift in the human economy. Big game hunting is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. It is boom and bust. A single successful mammoth hunt can feed a group for weeks, but failure means starvation. A net pulled from a river or a line of snares in the forest provides a stable, reliable source of protein. It is a safety net, both literally and figuratively. This new economic stability, likely managed by the women and children of the group, while the men were out on the dangerous big game hunts, would have changed the social dynamic completely. It reduced the daily risk of starvation, allowing populations to grow. It created more leisure time. It allowed for the production of surplus, which could be stored in woven baskets. The string revolution provided the secure economic foundation upon which the expensive and time-consuming projects of art and ritual could be built. You cannot spend a week painting a cave wall if you are constantly on the verge of famine. This quiet revolution, likely driven by the patient genius of our female ancestors, was the unseen engine powering the more dramatic explosion of symbolic culture. It reminds us that progress is not just about the dramatic spear point aimed at a mammoth. It is also about the quiet intelligence of the woven basket that carries the berries home. These external changes, the creation of social time by the fire, the economic stability of fiber technology were creating the perfect environment for the internal revolution. But what exactly was the crucial shift inside the mind? We have spoken of language and storytelling, but there may be a deeper cognitive building block that had to be in place first. A faculty so fundamental to your daily life that you are almost unaware of its constant operation. It is called theory of mind. Theory of mind is the understanding that other beings have minds of their own. It is the knowledge that their beliefs, intentions, desires, and perspectives are different from yours. A dog might know you are angry from your tone of voice, but it does not wonder why you are angry. It doesn't construct a theory about the bad day you had at work. You, however, do this constantly. You are doing it right now, constructing a theory about my intentions as the narrator of this story. When does this ability appear in a human life? Around the age of 4. This is when a child begins to understand that they can hold a false belief, that they can lie and deceive, that they can know something that someone else does not. It is a profound cognitive leap, the moment a child becomes a truly social being. What if the Great Revolution was the moment when theory of mind became fully developed and widespread in our species? Before this, social interactions might have been complex, but they were literal. After, they became a game of chess. I know that you know. You think that I want. She believes that he intends. This recursive understanding of other minds is the absolute bedrock of all complex human culture. You cannot have true storytelling without it. A story is not just a sequence of events, it is a journey into the minds of its characters. We care because we understand their motivations, their hopes, their fears. The Lion Man figurine is not just a hybrid creature. It's the embodiment of a being with a mind, an intention, a spirit that is different from both a lion's and a man's. It is a product of a mind that can think about other minds. This cognitive tool would have given its users an almost unbelievable social advantage. You could teach more effectively by understanding what your student did and did not know. You could form more powerful alliances by accurately gauging the intentions of others. You could deceive your rivals. You could create and enforce social rules based not just on brute force, but on shared beliefs about what the gods want or what the ancestors demand. You could create characters, gods, and spirits, and then convince others that they were real. The development of a sophisticated theory of mind was the key that unlocked the full power of language. It turned language from a tool for describing the physical world into a tool for navigating and manipulating the social world. This is the world we truly inhabit. Our survival depends less on our ability to outrun a predator and more on our ability to successfully predict what the people around us are thinking. This was the true evolutionary battlefield, and theory of mind was the ultimate weapon. Armed with this new cognitive weapon, how did our ancestors use it? We see the evidence on the walls of the great caves. We have long viewed this art as something spiritual or aesthetic, the first blossoming of the human soul. But what if that is only half the story? What if we have been misinterpreting these incredible galleries? What if they were not just cathedrals? What if they were also laboratories, libraries, and classrooms? Look closer at the art. It is not randomly placed. Certain animals appear in certain parts of the cave. They are often accompanied by a series of dots, lines, and other abstract symbols. For decades, these marks were dismissed as decorative doodles. But what if they are data? Some researchers have spent their lives painstakingly cataloguing these symbols, and what they have found is staggering. The same 26 signs appear again and again across thousands of miles of Europe for a period of 30,000 years. This is not random. This is a system, a code. Consider the markings found alongside the paintings of horses, bison, and deer. One sign, a Y shape, seems to consistently appear in conjunction with animals during their birthing season. Lines and dots in sequence often seem to match the lunar cycle. What if we are looking at the world's first calendar, a sophisticated system for tracking time, for predicting the seasons, for knowing when the salmon would run in the rivers and when the herds of reindeer would return to the valleys? This was not art for art's sake. This was a survival tool. It was a way of storing and transmitting critical ecological information across generations. In a world without writing, the cave became the external hard drive, the cloud server for the entire tribe. The images of the animals were the files. The abstract signs were the metadata, the labels that told you what the files contained. And think about where these paintings are located. They are almost never near the sunlit mouths of the caves where people lived. To see them, you have to journey deep into the earth, into narrow, dangerous, pitch-black passages. You have to crawl on your belly through tight squeezes, armed with nothing but a flickering tallow lamp. This was not a public art gallery. This was a place of initiation, a sacred archive. This is where the elders would have taken the chosen young. In the darkness, deprived of their normal senses, in a state of awe and terror, they would have been shown the sacred knowledge, the story of the tribe, the secrets of the seasons, the map of the cosmos. The paintings, illuminated by the flickering torchlight, would have seemed to come alive, their sides heaving, their legs moving. It was the first multimedia presentation. The combination of sensory deprivation, ritual, storytelling, and visual data would have permanently burned this information into the minds of the initiates. This was the prehistoric university, and its curriculum was survival. This perspective transforms our view of our ancestors. They were not just dreamy artists. They were scientists. They were information technologists. They were using the new power of their symbolic minds to build a new and more powerful relationship with their world, one based on the accumulation and transmission of knowledge. All of this raises a final, crucial question. We have explored the software and the cultural environment that allowed it to flourish. But was there a physical change in the hardware after all? Not a single genius gene, but a subtle, final remodeling of the brain itself, the tipping point that made all of this possible. To find out, we have to look inside the skulls of our ancestors. A skull is not just a protective case. As the brain grows in an infant, it presses against the soft, pliable bone, leaving a faint but readable impression of its shape, its folds, and its key structures. By creating these endocasts, scientists can reconstruct a ghostly image of a brain that turned to dust 100,000 years ago. For a long time, the story was simple. Brain size had reached its modern plateau with the first Homo sapiens and had not changed since. But size is a crude measure. The latest analyses of these ancient brain shapes are telling a new and much more nuanced story. The revolution may not have been in the size of the engine, but in the wiring. Specifically, it appears that between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, two key areas of the brain underwent a final, subtle reorganization. The first is the prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead. This is the brain's executive suite. It is responsible for long-term planning, decision-making, and social behavior. It is the part of you that can resist an immediate temptation for a greater future reward. The other area is the parietal lobes, on the top and back of your head. These are the great integration centers of the brain. They take the raw data coming from your eyes, your ears, and your sense of touch, and weave them together into a coherent, three-dimensional model of the world around you. They are crucial for spatial awareness, for navigation, and for the kind of complex hand-eye coordination needed to nap a delicate stone blade or paint a bison on a wall. The endocasts suggest that these specific regions subtly expanded, bulged, and perhaps became more densely connected. This was not a dramatic overhaul. It was the final tweak. Imagine a computer that has all the right components, but its internal wires are not yet optimally connected. Then a final software patch improves the communication speed between the processor and the memory. The computer doesn't get bigger, but it suddenly becomes exponentially more powerful. This subtle rewiring may have been the final biological permission slip for the cognitive revolution. It could be what allowed for a more sophisticated theory of mind to emerge from the prefrontal cortex. It could be what enabled the parietal lobes to not just map the physical world, but to begin mapping the imaginary worlds of myth and symbol. The hardware had finally caught up with the potential of the software. This provides a beautiful synthesis of all the theories we have discussed. It was not just genes. It was not just climate. It was not just population. It was all of it. A convergence. A long, slow process of biological fine-tuning in the brain created a vessel that was ready. A growing population and a stable food base created the network. The social space of the hearth created the incubator. And into this perfectly prepared world, the spark of fully symbolic language, of narrative, and of shared imagination was introduced. And the resulting explosion of mind is what created history. But how does a revolution of the mind actually begin? A change in our genes, in our biological hardware, is a slow, grinding process. It is passed down vertically, from parent to child, and it can take tens of thousands of years to become widespread. But the revolution we are talking about moved with a speed that biology simply cannot account for. It was a flash fire. This is because we are not talking about hardware. We are talking about the most potent, contagious, and transformative force on the planet, an idea. Think of this new form of language not as a feature we evolved, but as a technology we discovered. Like the discovery of fire, once it existed, it was unstoppable. It did not need to wait for the slow march of generations. It could leap from one person to another in a single conversation. It could cross entire continents in the time it took for a small band of travelers to meet another. It was a mind virus, a beneficial infection that reconfigured the cognitive architecture of everyone it touched. Imagine two separate groups of early humans meeting at a riverbank. One group possesses only a simple, functional language for communicating immediate needs. The other has unlocked the secret of the narrative. They can speak of the future, of the past, of abstract spirits, of the adventures of a great ancestor. Which group do you think would have a more powerful social bond? Which group could better coordinate its actions, plan for a harsh winter, or create a shared identity that binds them together against their rivals? The new language was a weapon. It was a tool for survival more powerful than any stone axe. It allowed for the storage of information not in a single brain, but across a collective consciousness. The wisdom of an elder could now be passed down not just as a simple instruction, but as a memorable story, a myth, a legend. This was the birth of culture, a second layer of inheritance that worked exponentially faster than genetic inheritance. Evolution had been working on our bodies for millions of years. Now, with this new software, the evolution of our minds had been unleashed, and it would quickly outpace biology forever. But here is where the story gets even stranger, more complex. The image of a single sudden revolution, a flash of light in the darkness, is compelling, but the ground beneath our feet is beginning to tell a more nuanced story. For a long time, we believed the silence was absolute until that 50,000-year mark. Now, we are finding faint whispers in the long quiet, cracks in the Great Wall of Stasis. Go back with me to a cave on the coast of South Africa. Blombos Cave. Here, archaeologists have found something that should not exist. They have unearthed pieces of ochre, a kind of iron-rich clay, meticulously engraved with geometric patterns, a crosshatch design. These are not accidental scratches. They are deliberate, abstract markings, and they date to 75,000 years ago, a full 25,000 years before the creative explosion was supposed to have begun. Nearby, they found snail shells, each one carefully perforated in the exact same way, clearly designed to be strung together as beads. This is personal adornment. This is symbolic expression. This is identity. And it is tens of thousands of years too early. What does this mean? It means the capacity for symbolic thought, the hardware for this new consciousness, was not switched on like a light. The potential was there, flickering in isolated pockets long before the main event. These were not one-off discoveries. At other sites in Africa and the Levant, we find evidence of pigment processing and the use of shells that date back even further, to over 100,000 years ago. These are the faint, ghostly precursors to the revolution. They are like sparks that failed to catch fire, moments of creative brilliance that, for some reason, winked out of existence without spreading across the globe. This deepens the mystery profoundly. The question is no longer just, why the revolution? The question is now, why did it fail so many times before it succeeded? So, what does this revised story truly mean? It shatters the convenient myth of a sudden singular spark, instead revealing a persistent, tenacious human spirit. Picture consciousness not as an on-off switch, but a persistent flame, flickering, dimming, and then reigniting across millennia. Each isolated burst of creativity, each forgotten symbol, wasn't a failure, but a crucial experiment. Our ancestors were not passive recipients of genius, but relentless innovators, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, time and again, in the face of unimaginable challenges. Their ultimate success, our very ability to ponder these deep mysteries, becomes an even more staggering testament to a species determined to express itself, to connect, and to leave its mark. It makes you wonder, what other profound lessons do the silent epochs still hold for us?